Hi there, this is Cris Rowan. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist and biologist and want to welcome you to Tech Talks, a webinar series that's designed to help you better manage balance between all this technology and healthy living. So important to kind of think back a bit, 20 years or so, to what life was like without all this technology. Families used to eat together at a table without tech. They would talk to each other about their day. Kids used to play outside a lot after school, in the evenings after dinner, and definitely on the weekends. They rode their bikes or they walked to school. And because of that, they got all this energy that kids have out so that they could sit still and pay attention in class when they got to school. Kids had times of absence or boredom when there was no stimulation and no activity, and these were times of creation and imagination. But the times are changing, and so I want to present some of the trends that we're seeing today with the use of all this technology and the impact on family life. So this is our new iFamily, what I call alone together. They're all gathered about in the same room, but everyone's on their devices. Here's iMommy. She's very busy networking, little kids going, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." Here's iDaddy, involved in video games and often pornography while they're taking care of the kids. And iParents, where are they? I wonder sometimes. Each of the kids have their own devices, and many of the kids are taking care of the other kids. And here's iBaby, often ignored and overstimulated. Many babies are put in front of TVs or in front of devices, and when they really need that human connection and attachment. There's a variety of iSoothers. This is the Fisher-Price is big in the market of mounting devices, so babies don't have to hold on to them. They don't get dropped. So there's teething rings and little activity centers that can receive iPads. Here's our little iToddler using technology a lot as a babysitter. A little girl showing her little brother what she knows on the iPad. iStrollers with iPad mounts. Anytime a child is sitting, it's detrimental to their development. Little children and toddlers should be moving a lot. Even children, youth, and adults should be moving a lot. And when we stop movement, we're impairing some very important developmental components. Here's a little iPotty. Parents who have older children remember the hours spent potty training where books would be read, stories would be told, and these were times of sharing that were really important for that bonding between parent and child. As soon as we add a device, the parent moves away from the child, and so that's problematic for development. Here's our iChild, sedentary, asocial, meaning that they're not learning to socialize, using devices where just little snippets of conversation are shared, and this leaves kids feeling lonely, feeling neglected, and not getting enough of what we term meaningful conversation that helps children to feel safe and secure and with a strong self-identity. Here's our teens, again, very disconnected in their forming of connections. So while this is a very familiar scene, that they very well may be actually talking to each other on these devices, but what this is doing is it's making them uncomfortable and not feel confident in real life social communication. Here's our schools. I call this the tech illusion that many teachers and administration have of one device for all, that the tablet or the computer, the laptop can do everything. And it's very much replacing the human element of teaching. So I put it forward, in the absence of that human element, can a child learn? Playgrounds, I travel all over the world, and this is what I see. Playgrounds everywhere are dilapidated and very boring. They've made playgrounds very safe, so no one can get hurt, but that means there's no challenge for the kids over the age of about 6. And we really need to focus on playgrounds and making them more interesting and exciting for kids. Because in my work, I've spoken to over hundreds of children and youth, and they tell me that there's nothing out there for them to play with. There's no basketball hoops. There's nothing of interest or challenge to them in playgrounds. So if you create it, they will come. They will put down the device and move there if we pay attention to this. Teachers, I work in schools, clinic settings, daycare preschools, and this is a very frequent observation, is the teachers on their device, their own personal device, doing I don't know what, and the kids are on their devices. So this is something that as we use, the device becomes an interface between adult and child, and when we separate adult and child, there's a lot of issues that arise because of that. We really are meant to all be interactive with each other, and then we attain development and health. But when we separate each other, then we are seeing a lot of problems because of that. And this isn't just, I don't mean to slam dunk teachers, therapists such as OTs and speech paths, and all of us psychologists are getting into this place where we're putting kids on devices, and then we go out on our own devices, and this really important element of sharing and communication and interaction is missed. So what are the results? Well, our children are safe. This is a very important thing for teachers and parents. They want the children to be safe, but in that safety net that we're creating, where they come home from school and they go on the devices, or where they spend time on devices at recess to prevent injury on the playgrounds, we're creating a dependent child and who's very insecure. The job of our 18 years with children and youth is to create independence so that they can, and confidence, so that they can move out into the world and create their own families and have jobs. But this is not happening, as you'll see throughout the Tech Talk webinar series, is that we're really producing a very different child these days who is not leaving the home and not feeling independent and secure and confident. Impulsivity, violence, antisocial behaviors are very common with children and youth today, and are creating problems both in home and school-based settings. Tantrums, difficulty regulating energy states are frequent. We see these all over in schools, daycare preschools, restaurants, community-based settings. Children are feeling neglected, and anytime a parent picks up a device, they are neglecting that child. So children are feeling anxious. This creates a lot of anxiety because that attachment between parent and child is not strong, and they're feeling very lonely, that they're not in connection with the adults. That makes a defiant child who can't empathize, who can't have compassion. Time spent in the virtual world does not teach these things. Video games especially are very violent, sexual and physical violence. And face-to-face communication is absolutely essential for creating a social child, a social youth, who can then go off and work in a work setting and be social. So these things aren't being taught in these virtual worlds. When the child moves from the virtual to the real world, they don't have skill to be empathetic, to be compassionate. And that creates what I term a sad, mad, and bad kid. So I see around 2 or 3 years old, really sad little children who are feeling neglected and lonely. And when they get to 3 or 4, they're stomping their little foot and going, I am mad. I need you. I'm not getting you. And I'm going to have these tantrums. And eventually by school entry, they're bad. They're doing things because they didn't get that attachment, that connection, that human modeling of good behaviors that they needed. And what we're doing as systems, health and education systems, is we're looking at that problem behavior and diagnosing it. ADHD and autism and bipolar and depression and anxiety. Anxiety is the fastest growing youth mental illness. So, and oftentimes with that diagnosis, those mental health diagnosis, comes medication. So this is not a good pattern. And what we really need to look at is building the fabric of the family, building the strength between the parents and the child and the teacher and the children. And with that, then we won't be seeing these problem behaviors that we're readily diagnosing and medicating. As well, when children bring this bad behavior into the classroom, there's chaos. And this is a typical problem that teachers are facing in schools today. And there are many teachers. We have the highest attrition rate in North America we have ever had, meaning teachers coming into the system and leaving it. 30% leave within the first year. And this is something that is astonishing because they can't manage this type of chaos in the classrooms. Another impact of technology that I'm seeing is that the basics are not being focused on in this technology illusion. The devices are coming in really fast, and everyone's going, oh, they can do everything without any research evidence that shows they do much more than entertain the child. And so the time spent on the tech is replacing the time used to be spent teaching basics like printing, reading, and math. And the device in the earlier years cannot replace those three subjects, the 3 R's. And so the basics, the foundation for literacy is not happening in school settings anymore. Printing is now passé. Teachers spend on average 10 minutes a day in the K to grade 3 primary grades teaching printing, and that's just not enough. So children who don't know how to print don't learn how to print properly are slow printers, and that affects their performance in every subject. So whether it's math or printing, spelling or sentence formation, kids who are slow printers are going to fail or not do as well in those subjects. And what I see is by grade 3, kids don't want to print, and they become defiant around any task that requires printing. They say it's stupid, it's dumb, because they don't want to look and show other children this messy printing, right? And so this is something that becomes problematic from grade 3 on. Slow printers don't do well, and they get defiant and frustrated, and why wouldn't they? I totally understand this. So literacy is plummeting, and when we go over in session 7, we're going to talk about cognition and academics, and I'm going to be presenting research in that area that shows that we're not doing that well. North America is not doing that well regarding literacy and graduating children or youth from high school with job entry literacy. So it's not the child with the problem. I work with families, and I see when we're looking at problematic behaviors and technology overuse, it's the whole family that's using the tech, overusing the tech. And really the parents are the drivers. They set the pace for technology use in the family. So 39% of parents use over 11 hours a day of entertainment-based technologies. And this is termed in loosely in academics, that this is termed an addiction. And so when we have that number of parents that are using that volume of entertainment tech, obviously the children social model, they look to the parent and they go, oh, they're on their tech, and so I'll go on my tech. And so this is, again, we'll talk about this, and this is why we're here, and I'm so glad that you're taking part in this series. But it's a system issue. All this tech use by parents and by teachers in schools is falling onto the children's lap, and they're forming unhealthy relationships with technology. So we're creating little children with addictions. So it's a system issue. And what we've done as a system is we pointed the finger at the child. We've individualized the issue and said, well, there's the child with the problem behavior, when really it's all of us that need to change our systems and to better help the child. So I pose to you now, and we'll revisit this at the end of session 8, are the ways in which we're raising and educating children with technology, are they sustainable? Are we creating a child that's going to grow up, they're going to be productive members of society, they're going to have jobs, they're going to be happy, they're going to have relationships, they're going to create grandchildren? Because we have a generation of children who have no experience of life without tech. They're hardwired for high speed. We're going to talk about how the brain is actually changing the wiring to process high speed information, and they're more isolated. They're exposed to high levels of media violence. We're going to talk about the impact of that, of all this visual and sexually violent imagery. They're largely sedentary. And because of being sedentary, the New England Journal of Medicine in 2012 reported that we're seeing the first generation of children, many of whom won't outlive their parents because of obesity, diabetes, and the results of that, which are effects on the heart and the brain. So this is something, when we talk about sustainability, we want to create a generation of children that are going to grow up and be sustainable, meaning they're going to be healthy. So I'm not against tech at all. Technology is amazing. We all know there's wonderful things that we can do with technology. What I'm going to encourage and help you to do is better manage a balance between technology and healthy living. So by healthy living, there are critical factors that children need that create foundations for development, for ability to pay attention and learn. And those are movement, touch, human connection, and nature. And we're going to go through each one of those. In sessions 2, we're going to talk about movement and nature. Session 3, touch and human connection, attachment, and really focus on helping you to understand as a family what those are and how to get them and how to embed them in your daily life, in your weekly life, so that we're ensuring that we create a child who's sustainable. When we grow a child, it's like building a house. And when we build a house, we want to make sure that foundation is solid, and we want to put the right ingredients in the foundation at the right time. And we know that if the foundation's faulty in a house, the house is not going to be as stable. It might fall apart. So growing a child is about really focusing on those foundational components, which are movement, touch, connection, nature, and making sure kids get enough of those at the right time so that we can create a child who's sustainable. So when we're talking about technology, it's not that technology is good or bad. It's not black or white. We have to consider all these parameters. We have to go through the who, what, when, where, why, how of technology before we can really start managing it. So I'm going to keep going back to this again and again throughout this whole series, because when you're trying to figure out and manage technology in your family, it's important to kind of understand things like, what's the age of onset? At what age do you want a child to, say, use a cell phone or a tablet? And what type of content, do you want them to access at what time? Because there's pro-social content, which is, media content where everybody's being nice to each other. And then there's antisocial content. Those are two totally different things where people are killing each other. So we want to look at the age of the child and decide, what's best. And all these things are going to be answered throughout these 10 sessions. And toward the end, in the actual 9th session, you're going to be creating the technology rules for your family. So don't get too caught up in it now. We're going to really focus on knowing what those critical factors are for the developing child and working through incorporating those into your day and into your weeks. And then we're going to, as we move through this all and you start getting more and more information on board, it's going to become more and more clear what you're going to do and when with your kids. So this is a process. And so just to understand, again, it's not, I can't say tablets are good or bad. They're not. It depends on the child. It depends on the age. It depends on the content. It depends on the duration is so important. So those are the 3 big ones: age of first entry into TAC, content, and duration. And you'll be very clear on that as we move through. So what are our goals? That we're going to talk in this session about what are the statistics, how much are kids using, and what are the guidelines? What are the experts saying, the pediatricians, regarding what the child should be using? We're going to spend sessions 2 and 3 talking about the 4 critical factors for child development, behavior, and learning. And then we're going to spend 4 separate sessions talking about these 4 domains. So the physical domain, the social, the mental, and the cognitive or academic. And the last 3 sessions are implementing these management strategies in home, school, and work settings. So the procedure, 10 sessions over the course of 10 weeks and totaling 10 hours of work. So the webinar series are split into 3 sections. At this point, you should have your handouts in front of you. You should have your outline in front of you that kind of reviews these 3 sections. So just briefly, I'm going to go through that. We have the first section is exploration, where we're going to look at the trends and statistics. That's today, movement and nature, touch and connection. Then we're going to start preparing you by giving you a lot of information around brain and body development, social, mental, and cognitive development, so that you have the information on board to start to make these decisions, these important decisions on how to manage, right? So session 8 is looking at tech reduction. 9 is an unplug. So I'm going to be asking your family to do a 3-day unplug, and that means from after school on Friday to going to school on Monday morning, you're going to unplug. So we're going to prepare you, give you lots of information about how to support this unplug. Obviously, as a family, you can choose to do this or not, but this is part of the program. And that resets the family. It reorients the family toward each other, toward healthy activities. And you're going to have so much information on board before you get to the unplug that you're going to probably get excited about it and actually enjoy it, because most of the families I work with do. And to the point of like bringing me to tears right now, the stories that I've heard from families about the wonderful things that happened during this 3-day unplug. So the last session then is, how are you going to maintain these rules? So you're setting the rules in session 9, and how are you going to maintain these rules, and giving you lots of supports. So these sessions are 30-minute sessions with me, and then you are following the session. I'm going to be giving you 30 minutes of homework. So the commitment is an hour, and I encourage you to, and everyone should attend. So I encourage you to set aside a routine time, whether it's in the evening, Saturday morning, whatever works for your family, so that everyone can be there. If for some reason one of the family members can't be there, during that week they should complete the webinar on their own. So it's on the computer, it can travel with that family member. Possibly you can Skype together when you do these sessions if someone's out of town. So it's important that everyone does it together, because of the homework session is an interactive session. That 30-minute session following me is interactive. You should all be working on that together. There is a point scoring system that as a family you can decide to do or not to do. So there will be tasks that are assigned every day, where you're doing movement, nature, touch, connection initiatives for 10 minutes twice a day. And so these initiatives are really important, and these tasks are really important to grind in all this information and the experience that happens during them. So this is something that you can assign 2 points if you do those 2 10-minute initiatives every day, 1 point if you only do one, 0 points if you don't do them. And you can track that over the course of the 10 weeks and add it all up at the end. So anyway, the point scoring system is for families who like to do a little competitiveness, and see who can do the best, and have fun with it. There could then be a decided reward for that family member who actually participates to the fullest. What I found working with families is that there's generally one family member who significantly overuses tech, and you're probably all pointing at that family member right now, and then there's other family members who don't. So what we want to do is give credence and praise to those family members who actually participate in this, and I would challenge that one family member who overuses to actually get the most points. And if you get the most points, then you actually win something, or you get something that you want from the family. So part of your homework is to talk about that after this session. So the usage stats. First, I want to talk about defining technology. What do I mean by technology? And separate. It's good to separate out this kind of, there's the devices, right? All the devices on the left there. And then there's the content. So, TVs, laptops, tablets, cell phones. And then there's what you watch on the device, right? So by technology, we don't include music. But we do include music videos. So when we're talking about restricting tech toward the end there, music, audio music can be very healthy, and in many different ways. I won't talk about at length about music, but and news, obviously, coming through a radio can be very not affect the system, the human system, negatively. So that's how we kind of separate out what technology is. It's not music or radio, but technology is music videos. So usage stats, the 0 to 2s are using a couple hours a day, mainly TV. The 2 to 5s, 4.5 hours a day. The 8 to 18s, 7.5 hours a day. Those stats are research-based statistics, and they're from 2010. I don't have a research, a huge research study to present to you since then, but Common Sense Media did do a survey in 2013, which pointed to that what we're seeing is that since the onset of the handhelds, which was after 2010, we're seeing usage rates up about 40%. So our 8 to 18-year-olds are using on average around 10 hours a day of entertainment, and this is just entertainment-based technology. This does not include educational technology, and it does not include passive watching, which is the TV on in the background. So what are our experts recommending? So the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with these recommendations in 2002. They reissued them in 2013. Our Canadian Pediatric Society jumped on board in 2010. Australia in 2012. So these are our standards that are put forward by our pediatrician academies that review tons of research on this area. And so I think what the American Academy of Pediatrics did by reissuing these guidelines was big, and stating that we're not going to bump them up just because everyone's using more. These are, there's a lot of concern in the pediatric community about what we're seeing in the realm of child developmental delays and child mental illness, and and relating it to technology. And so these are guidelines. Again, you might have a child who uses more, who is fine, and another child who can't use that much at all without having severe side effects. So this is something that we want to just use as a guideline. So they're saying nothing for the 0 to 2s because of the rapid growth of development of the brain, only an hour a day for the 2 to 5s, and no more than 2 hours per day for the 5 to 12s. They did not issue recommendations for the over 12s, but I would, maybe bump that up another hour, 3 or 4 at the most hours per day for our teens. And this is including educational technology. So our schools are actually using over this, right? Many daycare preschools have TVs and computers and iPads. So this is being our kids are using probably about 5 to 6 times the amount that the experts are recommending, which is why we're seeing so many problems. So what are the projections here? Is by the it's severe. I mean, so if a 7-year-old continues to use 7.5 hours a day, by the age of 18, they will have 3 years of 24-hour days on board of watching screens. By the time they reach 80 years old, they're going to have almost 18 years of 24 hours a day engaged in screens. So this is, again, just entertainment-based screens. Now that we're using more and more of in the schools, you could probably add more. So kids, think about this. Do you really, by the time you grad from school, do you really want to have spent 3 years of your 18 years, 24-hour day years, with screens? Like, have you absorbed stuff that you want to absorb? Have you developed the skills you want to develop? And so that's a lot. So there's some myths here. Children need to be entertained to be happy. They don't. The origins of creativity and imagination are boredom. My kids said to me, when they said to me, I'm bored, I said, well, yeah, you're boring. Go find something to do. And they had to. They had to use their brain to be creative and imaginative, to figure out something to do. Another myth is that all tech is educational. Some of it is. But it's just a tool, and that tool depends on how you use it. Another myth, all tech is harmless. No, it's not. We need to consider this age of first exposure, very important, the duration, the content. And the other myth is that technology is not addictive. It is. And the youngest child that I've worked with was 3, so that needed inpatient admission to get off the device. So we have to really worry about these things as families and parents. So session 1 homework, you have in your package a usage screen. So this is really important. This is your first task, of which if you do it every day, you get 2 points. Is we want you to record daily how much you're using. And you can see on this usage screen, I've broken it down into times during the day. And so what I want you to do is just make little check marks that day if you've used tech during that time. And at the end of the day, assign a quantity, an hours to it. If I were to ask you as a family, like, how much tech you're using every day, you would tell me about 30% of what you're actually using, and that's what studies show. So I want you to go through each day and break it down, and especially on the weekends. I want you to be really cautious and careful about doing this, so that at the end of the week you have a usage stat of how much you as an individual are using. You may need to make another copy of this form if you have more family members. So you also have a tracker tool, which is optional. So the idea with this tracker tool is that before, like at the very start of this series, you're going to record what, if there's any issues with you as an adult or children regarding development and daily functioning. And then at the very end, at the session 10, you can record the same thing. Now, I'm very interested in receiving copies of those if you actually do that. So these are for families who want to measure, did they get better? Because you're going to do that 3-day unplug in session 9, and then at the very end, I'm curious what changed, and if you're curious too, then fill that out, one per person. There's the point sheet, which I've already talked about. Suggest putting that on the fridge so that everyone can record on that every day. And there's a tech contract, which has, I've just thrown some things in there, but you can cross them off if you don't want to do them. You can add more things. There's more spaces there. But I want each family to kind of go through that and initial, every family member initials what they're agreeing to, and that just gives us all some place to start. Each homework session, you're going to be asked to watch some videos. I've got the times there so you can get an idea of how long. These videos are all located on my website, Zone and CA, under Media and Videos section. And then for these 2 videos, you click Cris Rowan videos. So at this point now, if you could watch the 2-minute reality check, the 4-minute Suffer the Children, and then your usage screen is going to be started maybe tomorrow or today, whenever, if you can kind of like remember when you used it. If it's the evening today, you can start it today, and then you'll have it finished by the next session. And your unplugged tracker sheets can be done over the course of a week. You don't have to do all those tonight. The contract definitely I suggest doing tonight. So I know I'm 5 minutes over, but probably you've got about 25 minutes there of homework to do. And good luck, and we will see you next week. Great meeting you. Have a nice week.